Touch your desk. Actually, you can't. Everything, your hand, the desk, is built out of tiny building blocks called atoms. And an atom is basically empty. If you blew one up until its center was the size of a marble, the outer edge of that same atom would be like a football field away. A marble in the middle of a stadium, that is what you're built from. That's what the desk is built from. So what actually happens when your hand lands on it? Actually, nothing lands. You know how two magnets flip away from each other if you try to push the same ends together? Every atom has a tiny charge around its outside doing a version of that all the time. And your hand's charge and the desk's charge just refuse to get any closer. That push is the entire thing you've been calling touch your whole life. You've never touched anything. All you have been doing is hovering just above every object you've ever picked up, including your phone. All right, this is strange, but livable. Here's where it stops being livable. Zoom out, past your hand, past the room, past the planet. You'd think the emptiness has to stop somewhere, but it doesn't. Scientists have measured space itself, and on average, a chunk of it the size of a large fridge holds about a quarter of a single atom. Most chunks that size hold nothing at all. Not very little, literally nothing. So you are mostly empty, floating inside something even emptier than you are. I had to read that sentence twice before I believed I had written it right. Here's the question that actually got me stuck for a minute. If it's basically all empty space, how much of a person is actually the real stuff once you throw out everything that isn't there? Turns out it's way less than you'd guess. Picture one grain of rice sitting by itself in the middle of a football stadium. That grain weighs almost as much as the entire stadium put together. Everything else, every seat, every railing, is basically empty air around it. That grain of rice is what's really there in an atom. So why does anything feel solid if almost none of it is actually there? Turns out solid was never really the point. The empty part of the atom isn't a hard shell, it's more like a blur, something that's kind of everywhere and nowhere at once. And it's the electric push from that blur stopping your hand, not a wall. You were built to feel solid using a design that's almost entirely empty. It just used electricity to fake the rest, and it worked well enough that nobody questioned it for most of human history. Now scale that up. All 8 billion of us. Imagine squeezing every atom in every person alive until there is no empty space left. You, your relative, your neighbors, every person on this planet. Squeeze it down to just the parts that were ever actually there. It fits in a sugar cube, not a small box. A sugar cube. Humanity still weighs what it weighs, something like 400 million tons, because squeezing out the empty space doesn't remove the weight, it just removes the nothing. Every person you've ever loved, every person you've ever resented, every stranger who's ever cut you off in traffic, all of it together, smaller than your fingernail. And this isn't even the extreme version of the idea. Some stars, once they burn through all their fuel, collapse in on themselves so hard that even that electric push finally loses. What's left is called a neutron star. A single teaspoon of it would outweigh a mountain range. Not because there's more stuff crammed in there, because there's almost no empty space left to squeeze out of it. So, you're mostly empty. Humanity is a sugar cube. Somewhere out there, a teaspoon can flatten a mountain range. I thought that was the ending of this video, honestly. It's not even the halfway point. Because you don't even need to leave the solar system to run into this again. Shrink Earth down to a marble, and the nearest star to our sun is sitting 4,000 kilometers away. Not far, right? Actually, nothing the whole way there. Zoom out further, and the pattern doesn't slow down, it gets worse. Most of the universe, by volume, is just empty pockets of space with almost nothing in them. One of those empty pockets has a name, which is a strange thing for empty space to have: the Booty's Void. It's so big that if our galaxy sat in the middle of it, we might not have discovered other galaxies existed until decades later than we actually did. Somewhere out there, in a different pocket of nothing, there's presumably a version of us looking up right now, seeing one lonely galaxy, assuming that's all there is, still waiting to be wrong about it. I don't know what to do with that thought, honestly. I just keep having it. Anyway, here's the number underneath all of it, the one that actually rearranged something for me. Everything you've ever seen, touched, or heard the name of, every star, every planet, every single thing made of atoms, adds up to only about 5% of the universe. The other 95% is something scientists call dark matter and dark energy, and nobody knows what either one actually is. Not still working on it. We can measure what they do, we just can't tell you what they are. 95% of everything, and it's not even the interesting kind of unknown, the kind where you feel close to an answer. It's just blank. Empty inside empty inside empty. And somewhere at the very bottom of that pile, a stick figure is trying to have a personality, and doing a surprisingly good job of it, all things considered. Back to the start, then. What's actually holding you together, and how empty is any of this, really? First of all, nothing is holding you together the way you're picturing it. There's no wall stopping your atoms from folding into each other. What's holding you together is a kind of standoff. Every tiny particle around the edge of your atoms refuses to sit in the exact same spot as another one. That refusal is the whole reason you have an outline, a shape, an edge. You're not a solid object resisting collapse. You're an agreement between particles that would rather not touch, renewed every second you're alive, and never once broken until the day it is. Second thing, it isn't really an answer, more of a correction. You've probably been picturing the universe as full, stars and galaxies scattered generously through space like sand across a beach. Wrong picture. I had the same until I started digging into this. It's closer to a handful of sand thrown into an ocean the size of everything that exists. Empty space comes first. Stuff, actual matter, is the exception that got lucky. Emptiness isn't the gap between the interesting parts of the universe. It's the default setting the whole thing runs on. The interesting parts are just where that setting happened to fail. That sugar cube from earlier isn't a fun fact once you sit with it long enough. It's a tiny scale model of the entire universe. Strip out the space nothing is using, and what's left is smaller than you can really stand to picture, no matter how many times you try. You walked in here thinking you were something, a body, a shape, a fixed amount of stuff sitting in one place. You still are, technically, but the ratio was never in your favor. For every bit of you that's actually there, there's an amount of you that's simply empty space, held into the shape of a person by a rule you can't see and were never taught to look for. So here's the part I still can't put down. If you're mostly nothing, held together by a force you never chose and can't even feel, what exactly is it you've spent your whole life so sure was there?